It was a Tuesday. Just another Tuesday for Mark Renshaw. Until it wasn't. The knock on his door wasn't a delivery driver, it was the police. Two detectives, their faces grim, their voices low. They had questions. Questions about the night before. Questions about a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Mark knew her, of course, they worked in the same building. But the detectives weren't asking about work, they were talking about murder. Sarah Jenkins had been found dead in her apartment. And someone, an eyewitness, had seen a man leaving the scene, a man who looked just like Mark. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Mark sat in a cold, sterile interrogation room. The air was thick with suspicion. The detectives laid out their case. It was damning. Two separate witnesses claimed they saw him near Sarah's apartment building. Around the time the coroner estimated she was killed, they picked his photo out of a lineup. Without hesitation, they said. It was him. Mark's denials felt hollow, bouncing off the concrete walls. He insisted he was miles away, at a coffee shop working on a presentation. But where was his proof? It was his word against theirs, and their story was painting a picture of a killer. The hours bled together, a confusing, terrifying blur. Mark replayed the previous evening in his mind, searching for something, anything that could prove his innocence. The coffee shop, yes, the daily grind. He was there. He remembered the barista, the smell of roasted beans, the quiet hum of other people working, but could anyone there remember him specifically? It was a long shot. The detective seemed so sure, so convinced. The weight of the accusation was crushing, a physical force pressing down on him. His future, once a clear path, was now a fog of uncertainty and dread. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping fear that this was a nightmare from which he wouldn't wake. How do you fight a story? How do you disprove what someone swears they saw? The evidence against him was simple, human, and powerful. Eyewitness testimony. It's one of the oldest forms of proof. But it can be flawed. It can be wrong. For Mark, sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights, the possibility of a mistake seemed remote. The gears of justice were turning and they were grinding him into their mechanism. He was no longer Mark Renshaw, graphic designer. He was a murder suspect, and his life was unraveling, thread by painful thread. As the detectives prepared the paperwork, a thought flickered in the back of Mark's exhausted mind. A tiny spark in the overwhelming darkness. His phone. It was always with him. But it wasn't just the phone itself, it was an app. Something he downloaded months ago and forgotten about. A fitness tracker. It was called Pathfinder, and it was supposed to map his jogging routes. He rarely used it for running, but he'd never turned it off. The app was always there, silently, diligently, tracking his every move. A digital ghost, shadowing his life. Could it be? Could this forgotten piece of software hold the key? He spoke up, his voice raspy. He told the detectives about the app, about its constant silent tracking. At first, they seemed skeptical. Another desperate attempt by a guilty man, but the lead detective, a man named Gable, paused. In this day and age, you couldn't ignore the digital trail. It was a long shot, he said, but they would look. The forensics team took his phone. Mark was left to wait, his hope now hanging by a slender, digital thread. The minutes felt like hours. Was the app even working? Was the data there? The silence in the room was a heavy blanket, suffocating him with what-ifs. The phone was a universe of data, a record of a life lived, and tucked away within its memory was the Pathfinder app. The forensic analyst opened it, and there it was, a detailed log, a digital breadcrumb trail of Mark's movements from the previous night. The data was precise, time-stamped, and irrefutable. It showed his phone leaving his office building. It showed the route he took, not toward Sarah Jenkins' apartment but in the opposite direction. It tracked him across town to a small, unassuming cafe district. His heart hammered in his chest as he waited for the news, any news. The analyst followed the digital path. It led directly to the front door of the daily grind. According to the GPS logs, Mark's phone had arrived at the cafe at 7:15 p.m. The police knew the estimated time of death was between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. During that exact window, the GPS data showed his phone hadn't moved from that location. It was a powerful piece of evidence. A silent digital witness that contradicted the human ones. It was the first crack in the case they had built against him, a glimmer of hope, but was it enough? GPS can sometimes be inaccurate, they needed more. The digital trail didn't end with the GPS. The investigators, now intrigued, dug deeper into the phone's memory. They found the cafe's Wi-Fi network information. The daily grind offered free internet and Mark, a creature of habit, had logged on. The phone's records contained the proof. A digital handshake between his device and the cafe's router. The connection was established at 7:18 p.m. It was terminated at 9:05 p.m. This wasn't just a location pin on a map, this was a confirmed, logged connection. He wasn't just near the cafe, he was inside it, using its services for nearly 2 hours. Detective Gable's expression began to change. The certainty he had earlier was gone. replaced by a thoughtful, investigative focus. The pieces were no longer fitting his original theory. A man can't be in two places at once. The eyewitnesses were confident. But technology, cold and impartial, was telling a different story. The Wi-Fi log corroborated the GPS data perfectly. It was creating a digital fortress around Mark. An alibi written not in words, but in code and data packets. The timeline was becoming airtight. The window of opportunity for him to have committed the crime was slamming shut. But there was one more piece to the puzzle. The final, unshakable proof. As the forensics team scrolled through his photo gallery, they found it. A selfie. Mark, looking tired, a bit stressed, was staring into the camera. In the background, the distinctive logo of the Daily Grind was visible on the wall behind him, and embedded in the photo's metadata, the digital fingerprint of the image, was the information they needed. The time the photo was taken, 8:02 p.m., right in the middle of the estimated time of death. The photo also had geodata, tagging it to the cafe's exact coordinates. It was the nail in the coffin of the prosecution's case. The GPS put him at the scene. The Wi-Fi logs confirmed he was connected and inside, and the time-stamped, geolocated selfie provided the visual proof. It was an unbreakable alibi, constructed from the mundane data of his everyday life. Mark wasn't just claiming he was at the cafe, his own phone was screaming it. The digital echo of his actions had become his most powerful defender. The eyewitnesses had been wrong, terribly, tragically wrong. Their memory had failed them, but the phone's memory had not. The walk out of the police station was surreal. The same doors he had entered as a murder suspect, he now exited as a free man. The air had never smelled so sweet, the sun never felt so warm. The relief was overwhelming, a wave that washed away the terror of the last 24 hours. He clutched his phone in his hand, not as a simple communication device, but as the key that had unlocked his cage. It was a strange feeling, to owe his freedom to a forgotten app and a random selfie. The digital breadcrumbs he'd unknowingly left behind had led him back to his life. The case against Mark Renshaw was dropped. The investigation pivoted, now searching for a new suspect, someone who was actually near Sarah's apartment that night. For Mark, the experience left a permanent mark. It was a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can be upended, how fragile innocence can be in the face of accusation. He had seen the system from the inside, and he understood how easily a mistake, a misidentification, could lead to a devastating injustice. Technology, which so many fear for its intrusive nature, had been his savior. It had provided a voice for the truth when his own was not enough. This case became a quiet lesson for the department, a powerful illustration of the dual role of technology and modern criminology. It can be used to track and convict the guilty, but it can also serve as a powerful tool to protect the innocent. Digital evidence is impartial, it doesn't have biases or flawed memories. A timestamp is a timestamp. A GPS coordinate is a GPS coordinate. It provides a level of certainty that human testimony, for all its power, sometimes cannot. The digital ghosts that follow us everywhere can, in the end, be the guardians of our truth. In our world, nearly every action creates a ripple in the digital ocean. A location ping, a network login, a time-stamped photo. We leave these echoes of our presence everywhere we go. For Mark Renshaw, those echoes were the difference between a prison cell and freedom. His story is a stark reminder that in the quest for justice, the truth can sometimes be found not in what people say but in the silent, persistent data that records where they have been. And in an age of uncertainty, that digital certainty can be the most important evidence of all.